1, 2, 3, 4. When I was young, I had a lot to say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come. Those three things we'll never forget.
Hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for tuning in. My name is Maria Belcher, and I'm the Executive Director at FestivALL Charleston, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to another wonderful online episode of Three Things. Before we kick things off, I'd like to give a special thanks to our season ticket holders, to you, our audience, for tuning in, and to our sponsors of Season 5. Thank you to West Virginia Public Broadcasting, Farmer Cline and Campbell, the University of Charleston, MVB Bank, Taylor Books, and the Charleston Convention and Visitors Bureau. All of us here at the Three Things and FestivALL teams are so very thankful for your continued support. Now, I'm sure that around town and on social media, you have seen the Support Small CWV initiative that is encouraging all of us in the months of November and December to support local. We all know that our small businesses, our local entrepreneurs, our local artists and musicians, they are the ones that are the lifeblood of our community. They help make Charleston the vibrant place we know and love. So we are so very thankful that the three small business owners that we have featured on today's episode could share some of their very precious time during the holiday season to speak with us today, to share with us where they've been, what they're up to now, and where they're headed. And before I introduce Jeff, I want to just give one last plug that you support small in Charleston today, every day, not just during the holiday season, but especially now in a time where they need it most. They have always been here for us, and now it is our turn to be there for them. So with that, I will now bring onto the virtual stage the founder and producer of Three Things, Mr. Jeff Shirley. Take it away, Jeff.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for joining us for this special themed episode of Three Things, My First, My Favorite, My Future. For episode 8 of season 5, we are focusing on shopping local here in Charleston, as it's that time of year when we are all out looking for gifts for the special people in our lives. And speaking of special people, we have 3 very special people in our lineup today. If you've never been to a Three Things live or virtually, let me give you just a short rundown of what you can expect. You will see 3 people talk about their careers and lives with the theme of first, favorite, and future. And what we as an audience hope to gain from that is how they got started, what they love about what they do, and what they hope to achieve in the future. Some people will paint a very broad picture, and others will focus on a specific or smaller part of their careers. And that we found that gives us a very wide variety of unique approaches to the task. Before we get started, I just want to thank my sponsors, my season ticket holders, my FestivALL team, Maria and Mallory, my technical director, Ruben Shirley, my artist, Ian Bodie, and the Three Things trio, Larry Gross, Michael Lipton, Mark Davis, and John Ingram for the theme song that you just heard, and Lauren Allen for my logo. But most of all, thank you for joining us. Our first guest is a third-generation jeweler here in Charleston. Her family store, Delfine's Jewelry, on Capitol Street is a cornerstone of the downtown shopping district. I've known Megan since I moved here 13 years ago due to some shared musical tastes. And back in 2010, I asked her if her and her company could design a gift that we could give out at the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame for the inductees and presenters of that year's ceremony. And wow, did they deliver. It was a beautiful necklace and pendant, and everyone thought it was the coolest thing that we had. So please welcome, to talk about her first, favorite, and future, Miss Megan Delfine Shackelford.
Hi, my name is Megan Delfine Shackelford. I'm here with my family's business, Delfine's Jewelry, downtown Capitol Street. I would like to thank Jeff Shirley for inviting me to be a part of this program. I really appreciate it. I started into this business before I was born, really. I'm a third generation jeweler. My grandfather was a watchmaker, and he had a jewelry store in his living room in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. He had a couple of showcases there and sold jewelry. My grandmother was a clockmaker. She taught herself how to be a clockmaker while she raised 3 children. They had that store in their living room until my grandfather passed away in the early 2000s. My dad went on to be a bench jeweler with 2 of his brother-in-laws, and they opened up in Charleston, West Virginia, what predominantly was a wholesale repair shop. They started their business in the back of Kay's Jewelry when Kay's was downtown on Capitol Street, and when Kay's moved into the mall, they opened up a spot in the arcade. He did wholesale repairs, mostly for different jewelry stores all across West Virginia. He was the main jeweler for that. Since then, we have predominantly become retail, full service jewelry repair store and sales. We still do offer the repairs. So I grew up here. I've always been around jewelry. And I started out coming to work here, mainly custodial work, sweeping the floors, mopping the floors, trying to get allowance money, really too young, and school hours conflicted with me really working here as sales, but always had kind of my foot in the water. Talking about doing the wholesale repair work, in those days, even when I was in high school, we were still doing the repair work for the mall jewelry stores. I think we probably had 10 accounts, and I would come here after school, and with my backpack, I would make the deliveries to the mall with all of this jewelry in my backpack. And I said, Dad, aren't you worried about your baby girl with all this jewelry? Aren't you worried that something's gonna happen to me? He said, Megan, look at you. You're the perfect decoy. Nobody's ever gonna know what's in your backpack. So I've loved working with my dad. We've always been such a good team. When I went to college and I got a job working at a local jewelry store in downtown High Street. I went to WVU. It was called Robert A. Yeagles. They had been in business for, I think, 73 years. And I got a job there as maybe just help. I did a little bit of sales. I learned there how to do watch batteries, just minor repair kind of things. But I worked there all throughout my college career and really learned so much. He was such a nice man with just a good standing name in the jewelry business, and I was so appreciative of the opportunity that he gave me to do that. After I finished with college, I thought, I've just spent all this time going away and earning this degree, and I really don't want to be in jewelry anymore. I've already done that. I didn't have to get a degree to do that. So I thought, well, let's try something new. I had a degree in public relations, and I found myself in a job with the Center for Organ Recovery and Education, a company outside of Pittsburgh working in organ donation. That was a really fulfilling job, something that I never imagined that I would get a sight into, but it was also very sad, where jewelry is such a happy field and you're celebrating and people are getting engaged and having anniversaries and birthdays. That's death and dying, and it was much different, and I really wasn't used to that at all. I did that for about 2.5 to 3 years before I called my dad begging, please take me back. It took some convincing to do, but he did. Finally, it got into the middle of Christmas season. He said, okay, please, I need your help, come back. So that was about 10 years ago now that happened. After I came back to work with my dad, he said, Megan, you really need a skill. You just can't work here. So it took me a little bit of time to realize what my skill was going to be. I decided maybe I should learn how to try to be a bench jeweler like he was. I thought that maybe he's so good at it. I thought, I bet it's just in my genes and I'm just going to be really good at it too. I went to jewelry school, just kind of like an introduction for 2 weeks. From one of the masters. His name's Blaine Lewis. He's now in Nashville, but I went to his class in Virginia Beach. And I was not just immediately great at repairs. I really am grateful that I had that experience, though. It helped me learn what needed to be done to the jewelry that needs repaired, even if I can't do it. And it also let me know that maybe I needed to find another skill in this business, because that wasn't just going to be it. You have to be very, very patient, and that is something I'm not. I also like to talk a lot, and when I'm on the sales floor dealing with clients and helping people find the perfect gift, there's a lot of talking going on. And when you're at the bench working, there's a lot of concentrating and quiet going on. So I decided that maybe sales is where I should really put my attention. I did, to do that, you really need to become educated. And as much as I wanted to believe that I'm a third generation jeweler and I've been doing this my entire life, I still needed some sort of skill. So I started taking classes at the Gemological Institute of America. They are the industry standard for diamonds and colored gemstones. And from there began taking classes as a gemologist. And that was very enlightening, and it really helped progress my career into the knowledgeable state that I needed it to go to. I think that my favorite is right now. I've been in this business for 10 years. I'm confident, I'm educated. I really feel like I can handle the day-to-day. This year has taught me that I can even handle the pandemic. It's not always easy, but we can always get through it. My dad has trained my husband to be a bench jeweler, and he's been able to take a more part-time position, and so it's really nice to know that in his older age there is some sort of sight of retirement, even if he doesn't ever retire in a traditional way, which I hope he does not. It's so nice to see that he doesn't have the everyday, day-to-day worry of being a small business owner. I love watching my dad and my husband work side by side at the bench. Being something that has been in my family, it's just so heartening to watch happen. We are operating here with just the 3 of us right now, so we are a true family business. I'm so grateful that my dad still works here. I still have all of his support. I can still call him with something that I want his advice on, even if it's just a pep talk. I'm so grateful that he has less stress, but he's still there for my stress. As for my future, I genuinely, truly hope that it looks something like its current state for a while. This is a new role that we've all just come into, really, with my husband Darren at the bench and my dad taking a little bit of a step back. And I think that we're all falling into our roles really well. We just signed a 10-year lease, and so we're really excited to know that we're going to be downtown for that time, at least, and probably longer. Charleston has been so good to us, and we appreciate everyone's support over the years so much. We've been here in this spot for over 30 years, if not right at 30 years, and we've been here as a business for 45 years. So we are very grateful and proud to say that we have been here as a small business that long. We're very excited to get back to more of a more normal sense of a year. We're excited really to get back into the art walks and FestivALL, and we always make a putt-putt for the putt-putt golf tournament, and really excited just to get back to that Charleston. But until then, we are here and we are open, and we have our beautiful plexiglass around for everyone's safety. And I thank you so much, Jeff, for asking me to be a part of this. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Megan, and congratulations on that new 10-year lease. I'm still laughing picturing you walking through town with a backpack full of jewelry at age 15. That's good stuff. Next up, we have from Elk City Records, Phil Melick, and that's located on West Washington Street in the wonderful Elk City district of Charleston. Phil is a lawyer turned record store owner, and if you ever get to go into his store and talk to him about music, it'll take you about 5 minutes before you realize that he is exactly where he should be right now. I'm a big fan, and my son Ruben is an even bigger fan, so please welcome from Elk City Records, Mr. Phil Melick.
My interest in records, if we're going to start with the first ones, has to begin with jazz. My father played classical music incessantly in our home. I've always loved that music. Every once in a while, he'd flip over the needle in the tone arm of his cheap old tabletop he had when we were really small kids, and bring a record out from the bedroom, put it on. This is it. It's Charlie Trout's Melody Artists. It's a dance band recorded in Atlanta in 1926. It's a novelty. It's called Transportation Blues. And it was fun to listen to when we were 3 to 6 years old. And so forth. Then it'd be back to Brahms. Well, in junior high school, we finished our spring concert a little earlier than usual, and Mr. Chig told us we'd done a good job. We didn't need to rehearse anymore, so he was going to let us bring in records we could play. But the rule was you couldn't bring in anything that was heard on the radio. He wanted us to find things that were unusual. I went home and told Dad about this. He said, "Well, can you play a 78?" And I said, "I don't know." I checked and found out that he could, so then I was sent back with this. It's the Metronome All-Stars, 1941. It starts with Buddy Rich, and then of course Count Basie on piano and Charlie Christian on electric guitar. Mr. Chig was very excited, and I was very excited. It turned out there were a lot more records like this than there were silly songs. And the shelves back in the bedroom. That summer we went to Chicago. I went with Dad to Rose Records, and I got to buy my first album. It was This Is the Big Band Era. It was an introduction to an RCA series that was coming out at the time. Well, that really hooked me on jazz music. But the first track on the album was kind of an outlier. It was recorded not in the 30s and 40s, but in the 20s. Turns out it's been a jukebox hit. It was a jukebox hit for decades. It's called South by Benny Moten's Kansas City Orchestra. Ragtime rhythm. To the local library, and it was a good one. They had things like this, the Columbia box set series of reissues, the Jazz Odyssey series. And I got to see pictures of some of these wonderful musicians that were fascinating me. That led into some of the favorites that I'll talk about in just a minute. One of the records or tracks on that Columbia LP that I just wore out was the last one on one of the sides. I've since acquired it on 78 when I was at a collector's get-together and asked to be one of the presenters about what's your desert island, a favorite record, and tell us why. I played this one. It's Smiling Skies by Benny Maroff and his orchestra, and it ends with a very impassioned cornet solo from Wild Bill Davison. That riff, that is very, really exciting. Those get-togethers and listening to music with other people and sharing your interest and learning from each other has always been a big part of what's kept me going and exploring music on record. I remember going to the first convention like that in 1974 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was scared to death. There I was, a teenager among these old grumpy men listening to these records, and but I took along a few things based on who was supposed to be there, and I got to meet Jabbo Smith. Not only did he autograph my album for me, he was a little nervous too when he saw the kid sitting at a table all by himself. He came over and asked if he could sit and have dinner with me. I'm going to play one of the records that's on that LP. This is Jazz Battle. It's a record for record collectors. It's a reissue, the United Hot Clubs of America. It's a shame not to be able to play every one of these things all the way through, but 15 minutes. Well, I guess some of the other favorites I have now are, the ones that don't fall neatly into any musical category, the genre crossers, the music with the blurry lines around it. I'm going to just play a couple examples and show them to you. This is my favorite Leroy Carr record. It's not a blues. It's a recording of a standard song by Irving Berlin, How About Me? Leroy Carr played a lot more than blues in live performance. This didn't sell, so he didn't get to do much more like it. But he could sure play and sing any kind of song. Scrapper Blackwell on guitar.
Too long I held you close to my heart. Too much I loved you right from the start.
Wanting to learn from other people is one of the reasons we opened the record shop. And a lot of the things that I guess are current favorites of mine, I'd never even heard a few years ago. I'm just going to play you a couple things that have come my way just because of the people I've gotten to meet running the record shop. This is a test pressing of a recording, a tune called Makes No Difference What Life May Bring, recorded by Cliff Carlisle for Decca in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1940.
Makes no difference what life may bring, sunshine or sorrow, most anything. You'll always see me smiling, smiling them old blues away.
That that's part of the tributary that showed up 15 years later in rock and roll. Music like this. The Falcons, with a teenage guitar player named Wally Richardson, who later went on to make all kinds of jazz and good funk records after he got back from the Army.
I can tell you now, darling, night after night, day after day, I go over the dreams that are mine, darling, never, never, ever.
Mr. Richardson's still living, 90 years old in retirement, has a WordPress blog site where I've written a question to him about that record, wanting to learn more from him about how he came to be making that record. Then some of the other things that have become favorites are some of the West Virginia musicians that recorded on some of the local labels. The Wilson family was on radio and television in Beckley and other places in West Virginia in the 50s and 60s. And they recorded on the regional Salem label. I'd never heard of these people when we opened the record shop. This is a current favorite of mine. I guess you can already tell I have at least one foot in the past, but I'm supposed to relate all of what I've done here today to the future, and I think it relates pretty well. We're going to let the Wilson family singers play in the background. A few years back, made a big change in my life. We decided to open a record shop in Elk City at the bottom of Watts Hill where my wife grew up. That Jabbo Smith record that he autographed for me had come from the Moles Record Hole, the first used record store I fell in love with when I was a kid back in Ohio. And I've always loved places like that, and I always dreamt about having a place like that I could do the right way for other people that wanted to learn more about music together. That's been a real blessing in our lives, and I think we like to think it's helped Charleston to be just a little bit better place to visit and to live. We've had people come to the shop repeatedly from Japan, we've had a big-time soul collector come from England. We also have a wonderful group of local people who have come and visit us, some of them weekly, and find something new to enjoy together. The device like this phone I'm using to create this video, it's wonderful, but the technology can tend to pull us apart from each other in our day-to-day lives, and even to separate us from ourselves. I think we need more time in quietude, listening to music, but then also talking with others about music, and how that relates to ourselves as a community. I mean, I think things are moving in the right direction. We now do a community radio show on WTSQ Phenomenal on Sunday mornings at their invitation. You can hear more records without me talking over them or cutting them off too short. But I want people not just to shop locally, but to feel and love locally. It can all grow out from there, but the greatest gift we have is each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil, and we all consider you a gift to our community. Make sure you stop by his record store and check out his radio show. I promise you will be glad you did. Last up tonight, we have Ted Armbrecht from the wine shop at Capitol Market. The wine shop was one of the original stores to open when the Capitol Market opened in 1997 and has remained since. I remember a few years ago I approached Ted and asked him if he knew a local winemaker that I could get to do three things. And he gave me some names and some numbers of some people, and I haven't pulled the trigger on any of them yet. But when we were putting together this Shop Local episode, his name was one of the first, if not the first person that came up. I'm so glad he agreed to do this for us. So please welcome from the wine shop at the Capitol Market, Mr. Ted Armbrecht.
Hey Jeff, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm really honored to be a part of this episode of Three Things, First, Favorite, and Future. I also really appreciate that you are choosing to highlight small, locally owned businesses during the holiday season. I'm a firm believer that it's the small, locally owned shops that really help give Charleston its identity, and I'm thrilled that we were able to be a part of that fabric for the last 23 years. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ted Armbrecht. I'm the managing partner of the wine shop at Capitol Market. My family is native to West Virginia. Both my parents are actually from Wheeling, and it was my mom's family were the owners of Stone and Thomas department stores. And so after they got married in the 50s, they moved down here to Charleston so that my father could help manage the store here in town. I have 4 older sisters. None of them live here in West Virginia anymore. It's just my folks and I that are still here. And I'm married to Heather Hill, who was also born and raised here in Charleston. We opened the wine shop at Capitol Market in the fall of 1997 as one of the original tenants. But really the roots of the shop go back to the early 80s. That was around the time when the West Virginia legislature passed legislation loosening the laws governing the sale of wine and liquor. And they moved away from state stores as being the only place where you could buy that stuff. So my father, who at that point was an executive at Stone and Thomas, got together with local wine writer John Brown, who at the time was writing a wine column for the Charleston Daily Mail, and Judge Andy McQueen, who was making wine with John, but coincidentally had also been one of the major drafters of the new wine legislation. And those 3 guys over lunch at the Coyer Diner hashed out a plan to put several wine departments across many of the Stone and Thomas stores here in the state. And their collaboration led to Stone and Thomas being the first privately owned wine shops here in the state of West Virginia. John and Andy would travel around the state conducting wine tastings. John's wife, Debbie, for many years served as a wine buyer for the shops. And most importantly, Andy's wife, Susan McQueen, who was also known as Shadow, served as the manager for all of the wine departments. And she really was instrumental in upping the game of wine here in the state of West Virginia, and would later go on to be my mentor here in the business. While this was developing, I was a teenager growing up here in Charleston. My parents were obviously wine drinkers, and they would often share a bottle of wine with dinner. At that time, the choices were pretty limited to high-end European wines or some up-and-coming wines out of California or some of the other lesser-known wine regions around the world. On special occasions like Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving, my parents would ask my sisters and I if we would like to try a sip of what they were drinking. More often than not, what they offered really didn't appeal to my palate. I found the wines to be too dry or too alcoholic, and they really just didn't match up well with my Coca-Cola informed taste buds. Then in 1984, when I was 15, the family was up north in the Northeast visiting one of my sisters who was in college up there. And having dinner at a fancy restaurant, my father ordered a white wine off the list from France. This time when he offered me a sample of it, I was really taken by how much I liked it. here was something that I could enjoy, and this was a real first for me. Instead of the overly ripe, heavily oaked white wines that I had tried and disliked, this was a refreshing white that seemed to strike this great balance between bright acidity and a touch of sweetness. The wine smelled of honeydew melon and flowers, and this was something that I found that I could really drink. I could probably enjoy a whole glass of this, so I would say to my dad, more please. The wine was called Vouvray. Beyond the name on the label, I knew nothing more about what it was, nor do I expected my father. It probably hit the right price point as far as he was concerned off the wine list. All I knew is that I liked it, and it would still be a long time before I came to appreciate wine, but that experience was really the first time that I realized that wine was enjoyable and something that I liked. So, what was this wine that I was drinking? Vouvray. In the United States and much of the New World, wines are labeled by the predominant grape in the blend. So, think Cabernet Sauvignon or Chardonnay. But in the Old World, wines are labeled by the region or the appellation that they come from. Vouvray is an appellation that sits east of the city of Tours in France's Loire Valley. And it's centered around the town known as Vouvray. Chenin Blanc is the only grape that's grown in the vineyards around this town. And it's a white grape that makes wines that can vary greatly from very sweet to very dry. They also make still wines or sparkling wines from Chenin Blanc. The best are generally well-made medium dry wines with a touch of sweetness that really helps balance out that sharp acidity. To this day, I have a soft spot for Vouvray. I often find myself recommending it to customers who are looking for an approachable, thoroughly enjoyable white wine. So let's fast forward to 2007. The wine shop had been in operation here at the Capital Market for 10 years. As I said, we were one of the original tenants when the market opened in the fall of 1997. And it was right around this same time that Stone & Thomas was sold and moved out of the downtown store. My father had put together a group of owners, including Susan and Andy McQueen. Susan came on board to serve as the manager for the shop, and it was she who taught me everything I know about wine. I owe a great deal to her. She was an amazing mentor, and I'm really thankful for all the years that we worked together. She was full of wine knowledge, and she really taught me everything that I know about wine, all the ins and outs of selling wine, like how to taste it, how to talk about it, and how to sell it to the consumer. When she retired in 2006, I took over control of the day-to-day operations of the shop. By then, I had developed a pretty good understanding of most aspects of the wine trade. I'd traveled to California wine country, and I'd seen how to make wine, what it took to make wine from vine to bottle. And it was around this time also that I had found that I really had an affinity to Pinot Noir. I had the opportunity at that point, one of my distributors managed to get me an invitation to something called Oregon Pinot Camp. This was a week-long trade-only camp that led me to my favorite discovery, Oregon wines, specifically Oregon Pinot Noir. I'd already tasted lots of Pinot Noir from around the world and found that in most instances, this was the wine I gravitated towards. But my week in the Willamette Valley was a total wine opener. It really allowed me for the first time to take a deep dive into one region and learn what it takes to make what is still my go-to wine, Oregon Pinot Noir. You can imagine that Oregon Pinot Camp is about as fun as any summer camp, and I would hold it up against any other travel-related business as the most enjoyable. You couldn't ask for much more fun than a week of tasting wine and learning about a region. Every day we would have 2 sessions, each with different winemakers. The morning sessions would be indoors and would focus on different aspects of the Oregon wine trade. What makes Oregon a place for world-class Pinot Noir? What are the defining characteristics of Oregon Pinot Noir? And how does Oregon Pinot Noir differ from other notable wine regions of the world like Burgundy in France or California's Russian River Valley. The afternoon sessions were outside in the vineyards, and they always focused on the unique terroir of the Willamette Valley. We got to get out in the dirt and learn about the different soils, the effect that the coastal range and the Cascade Mountains had on the grape growing in the region, and also, importantly, what steps at that point were being taken by the winemakers to address climate change in the vineyard. All this really led to a much deeper knowledge of the region and an appreciation for the quality of wines that were being produced there. But as informative as these sessions were, the real highlights of the week were the nightly dinners hosted by the different wineries. Prior to dinner, we would have an opportunity to taste a multitude of current offerings from the contributing wineries, the wineries that were participating. And this was such a great chance to talk one-on-one with the winemakers and other camp attendees who were from all corners of the wine industry all across the country. It was a great opportunity to tie the wines we were tasting back to the seminars we were attending each day. But dinner time was also when the participating wineries would break out older vintages from their wine libraries. And this was what really made the week. We'd be sitting there at the tables feasting on salmon that was cooked over on a spit over an open fire. And these winemakers would circle around with these large format bottles, magnums of older vintage Pinot Noir from great vintages. And it was totally decadent. I would find myself eagerly holding out my glass to get a sample of the 2006 Domaine Serene Grace Vineyard Pinot Noir, and then only find myself chugging it down so that I could get a glass of the 1993 Cameron Clos Electrique that was fast approaching. It was just such a great opportunity to try a number of fabulous wines and get to know a region and hobnob with a lot of other people in the trade. So it was a fabulous time to really gain some deep knowledge. By the end of the week, my teeth were stained a dark purple, but I'd gained a wealth of knowledge about a specific region. One of my comments to a winemaker at the end of the week was what a great marketing tool this was for Oregon wine growers. And here they were sending all of these tradespeople, these people in the wine industry, back to all corners of the country as unabashed acolytes for Oregon Pinot Noir. To this day, Oregon Pinot Noir is among my favorite wines, and I'm proud of the great selection of Willamette Valley wines the shop has represented since Pinot Camp. Incidentally, for those of you who also enjoy Pinot Noir, Oregon offers a similar event to consumers every year called IPNC, which stands for the International Pinot Noir Conference. And if you love Pinot Noir, this is a real bucket list event, and I really recommend you going. I guarantee you will enjoy it. I'm recording this on Thanksgiving Day, and it's an apt time to reflect on how thankful I am to own and run a small business here in Charleston for 23 years. As the other owners on this episode of Three Things can likely attest, running a small business is not easy. There are challenges every day that arise that a larger competitor would have many more assets to address. I'm thankful for the support of this community, and particularly during COVID, I've really been amazed at the support that our customers have given us. Whether it's just them stepping up, trying to support local businesses, or what, it never ceases to amaze me how fortunate we are with the loyal customer base that we have. And I think that this is, I can speak for my staff and I, this is really one of the assets that a small business has, is that ability to develop relationships with our customers and get to know what it is that they like and what their tastes are, and know when they walk in the door that this might be a wine that they really might enjoy. And I think that this is one of the advantages that a small business has over a much larger competitor. That ability to focus on customer service and really get to know who our customer is. And on this day, it's also really important for me to recognize the great staff that I have. Many of them have been with me for years. Scotty, the manager here at the shop, has been with me for 14 years. So I feel honored that they have chosen to spend their days and their working hours here at the shop. They are familiar faces to every one of our customers. They've been able to get to know the customers and develop good working relationships with them. The wine shop would not be what we are without the commitment that they show every day to the customers here in the shop. So I really appreciate everything that they do. I also know the success of my business rests on the shoulders of all those folks I mentioned earlier in this video. My father, for his vision all those years ago on recognizing the need and opportunity for a small, independently owned wine shop here in Charleston. And for Susan and Andy McQueen, and the real foundation that they established here at the wine shop at Capital Market. Andy, for so many years was the face of the shop and really the celebrity. He led all our wine tastings, and he was constantly entertaining our customers with his cooking stories and his deep knowledge of wine. I really can't say enough about Susan. She's really the one that gave me the confidence to know that I could learn this trade and really become someone that could run a small business like the wine shop. I miss having her here every day. She was really a great person to work beside and a lot of fun at the same time. And John Brown. John and I often communicate still to this day on wine-related things. He'll call me when he's talking about an upcoming article he's writing for his blog, and we'll discuss different wines that might be of interest. And he's also always a sounding board for me when I've got some ideas that are wine-related. And I always enjoy having the opportunity to collaborate with him on all things wine-related. So, when I think about the future, last night I had a conversation with a friend about Charleston and the positives and negatives of living in a town of this size here in West Virginia. We all know that we're presented with a lot of challenges living here in West Virginia. Anyone who lives here knows that. But for all those challenges, this town and state have a lot to offer. It takes a lot of folks every day working hard to try and better this community. I'm happy to play my own bit part as a small business owner here in town. Looking towards the future, I hope that the wine shop continues to grow and thrive with the help and support of my staff and our customers. I really hope that I'm able to, like those that came before me, pass on the things that I have learned so that there will always be a top-notch, independently owned wine shop here serving Charleston, West Virginia. Thank you again, Jeff, for letting me be a part of this episode. I've enjoyed looking back on the 3 things that have helped shape me in the wine shop at Capital Market. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Ted. That was great. And I know I'll be stopping by the wine shop for one of those Oregon Pinot Noirs very soon. And I also like that our common theme tonight through all of our small business owners was their love of Charleston and their respect for their customers. And that's how a small business can be a big deal in a town like this. The respect for your customers. Thanks to all my sponsors. Thanks to my crew. Thanks to you for watching. And be sure to check out our Season 5 closer, as Episode 9 is on December 16th with artist Brian Pickens, baker Jade Akers, and NPR journalist Giles Snyder. Thanks again.
When I was young, I had a lot say. So I learned how to sing, I learned how to play. You said you were mine when you heard my song. After all these years, you still sing along. The first time, the best time, the good times to come, those three things we'll never forget. Well, staring at my canvas with its misplaced strokes, I took it into town to show some folks. I was only after a little good advice, but their eyes lit up. They asked me, what's the price? The first time, the best time, the good times to come, those three things we'll never forget. An old pile of wood and a can of paint. You can see what it could be, not what it ain't. A blank piece of paper, a thought in your head. Say what you're saying till all you're saying is said. Oh, the first time, the best time, the good times to come, those three things we'll never forget. The first time, the best time, the good times to come, those three things we'll never